Yan na. Kamusta kayo dyan mga kameta? Habol lang tayo ng mabilisan. Ang hirap talaga itong time zone na ito eh. I made earlier adjustment na nasa The Hague tayo. Pero of course, medyo iba yung vibes dito sa Espanya. Same time zone, more or less. But syempre iba eh. Iba yung um, atmospherics dito, to put it mildly. Anyway, guys, so I was working on a number of stuff ahead of the State of the Nation address, including a couple of articles and long papers. So abangan yan. Assuming nagbabasa. What the- Yan ang problema sa atin. Ay nako, alam mo guys, it feels lonely minsan maging writer or ano sa um, public thinker, intellectual, whatever. Minsan mahirap sa Pilipinas kasi tama rin yung sinasabi ng kaibigan natin na ano si Prof. Ambet na if you look at our national hero si Rizal, he's a great writer. He has written so many things for a country that barely reads him. I mean, yung mga binasa pa sa kanya mga nobela, mga mandatory lang sa school yan. I mean, ilang taong kilala nyo na nagbabasa ng mga Rizal works, especially his books and novels and long essays na hindi required sa school, na hindi part of some sort of curriculum or some mandatory um, activity, no? Ako, when I read his novels in latest translations dun sa Penguin Books, I got to even more appreciate, what Rizal brought into the fourth. And nung nabasa natin yung mga essays niya, including, the Philippines century henceforth, yung kanyang predictions or prognostications about the Philippines 100 years ahead, you just realize there's so many layers to Rizal. So it's quite frustrating, to be honest, na to realize na in the 21st century, barely few people read Rizal in the full breadth of his works and contribution. Not to mention other ilustrados with all their great writings. And then, to be honest, for a lot of us also, I'm mainly ang audience natin when it comes to writings is an international audience. Probably there have been more people, I don't know, in Singapore and US who have read my works than, I don't know, back in Manila or something like that. So that's why we do these vlogs. That's why we do these things, because this is the other way of getting out the message. Anong gagawin natin? Iyak tayo, magpaano tayo? No, you know me. I'm persistent. I'm aggressive, and tenacious. And as John Neri, our former colleague at the Philippine Daily Inquirer, who's now in Rappler, said, if you look at it, Rizal would have most likely been a vlogger had he been born in our era. I think he would have also written a lot. Just like yours truly, he would have tried his best to use the Filipino people's facility with the dominant world language, which is when during his time, kasi he wrote in Spanish, which was not the dominant world language, lingua franca back then. The dominant global lingua franca, at least in the literary intellectual world, was French. That's why he wanted to write his third um, novella in French, but he was not able to do that. So we Filipinos today have a big advantage dahil nagsusulat tayo or nagsasalita tayo in English, which is still the dominant lingua franca. Whether you're in China, whether you're in India, whether you're in Brazil, any major country in the world, it's accepted that if you want to be part of the global intellectual, literary, even political world, you have to have some facilitative language when it comes to English. So I think we're very lucky compared to our Ilustrado predecessors and forebears in a sense that ang we have in some cases almost close to a mastery of the dominant language of the world. And yet kung titignan niyo talaga guys, yun nga parang minsan parang nagsasalita lang, babasa lang, nagsusulat lang tayo para sa mga international or dayuhan audience, which is quite frustrating. Now I keep on seeing people saying sana magsulat ka in Filipino, whatever. Now just to be clear, I'm a UP graduate. I teach at the University of the Philippines. So dumaan kami sa proseso. We had to take our Filipino subjects, and I'm proud to say that I did pretty good. Despite my coniotic accent and yeah, minsan suboptimal Filipino, but I think I did pretty well during college. Um, Having said that, yun ang problema ko eh. More than welcome if there are people there who are willing to help us out with translating some of our works, but it has to go both ways. As much as I have to adjust and make sure na I'm communicating in not only in Filipino but also in Ilocano sometimes. So kahapon kasama na yung mga Ilocano dito sa Ibiza. So I try to speak as much Ilocano as possible, right? Obviously, I ask them a lot about Duterte and what they think about the Awanin, Nalpasan, Unity, mga kasi. Um, um, I think it has to go both ways. I think it's a shame that we're not leveraging yung hindi natin talagang minamaximize yung ating exposure and supposed facility in terms of the dominant language of the world. I mean, the advantages that comes with speaking and writing in English is unfathomable. I mean, Spanish is a beautiful, great language that I look forward to learning more and more about in the coming years. French is a language that I've been exposed for quite some time. German is something also to a lesser degree, but English is English. English is in English. You want to write for the top newspapers in the world, it's in English. New York Times, Washington Post, Foreign Affairs. And I'm pretty proud that I've been able to publish for them. You want to publish for the biggest publishers in the world. You want to be on the biggest news channels in the world, BBC, CNN, whatever. I've done this. This is all in English language. Of course, I mean, like CNN will have their counterparts in different countries, but at the end of the day, diba? So nakaka-frustrate yan, I'll tell you honestly. But so what I'm doing is, this is my essentially compromise, which is, I do my writings and all as much as possible. At the end of the day, try natin, to pass on the message by doing these vlogs and all of that. But I hope this will change. I hope as the country gets wealthier and we're set to become an upper middle income country soon, God willing, knock on the wood. And as our middle class becomes larger, we have tens of millions of middle class. Sana naman, 'di ba? Magbigay din tayo ng attention sa mga sinusulat ng mga Pilipino, 'di ba? Hindi lang yung mga dayuhan dahil ang dami rin magagaling sa Pilipinas. I mean, there's a reason why binabasa yung mga katulad namin sa major capitals of the world. So maybe yung mga kababayan din natin sa Pilipinas, they want to also read, columns, more and more of columns by people like Ambeth Campo, I don't know, writings by Lelo Claudio, writings by all of these great Filipino thinkers and writers in the country, right? I'm just saying that, guys. Anyway, thank you very much also dun sa mga ating mga kababayan joining us from different corners of the world. I see a lot of folks joining us from the United Kingdom here. I think there's something with the time zone and algorithm. Napansin ko when I joined from Netherlands, iba yung algorithm ko. When I joined from Spain, it's different. When I joined from the US, when I joined from Japan, iba-iba yung algorithm natin. Lalo nakikita ko yan sa TikTok eh. Nakapansin ko sa TikTok, iba yung algorithm natin depending on where I join in, like people that watch us and all of that. Anyway, nasaan na yung isa? Parang gusto ko yata mag-TikTok Kasi hindi ko alam kung kaya ng kaya nitong saan ko ba nilagay yun? Never mind. Okay, never mind. Okay. So the third State of the Nation address is coming up soon. In theory, napakamahalaga itong parating na third State of the Nation address dahil if you were to think conspiratorially, right? As we said, the Arroyo Doctrine. If by some freak accident, and we live in crazy world, right? Donald Trump was almost killed the other day. I mean, just if he hadn't tilted his head by a fraction of, I don't know, millimeter, wala, tapos na usapan, di ba? Wala, civil war mode na yan. I mean, had Trump been assassinated successfully, we would have been in a kind of a mini civil war situation in the US. I mean, we would have gone crazy. Anyway, so because of the Arroyo Doctrine, some people are wondering, if in a crazy situation happens and Marcos is replaced, then whoever becomes the next president can also run in 2028, and therefore the Arroyo presidents of almost 1 decade in power constitutionally. Ibang usapan ni extra constitutionally or changing the constitution or all sorts of mumbo jumbo. So Marcos making his third State of the Nation address successfully and going through the whole process in a week would also mean that not a week actually, ano yun, Monday yata yun, di ba? Would effectively, negate the possibility of having another decade-long president, right? Um, so that's why medyo the third Sona is always watched carefully, right? Because of that Arroyo precedence. Because remember, constitutionally, pwede lang tumakbo isang Filipino president. I mean, pwede ka maging presidente lang for one term, 6 years. Yun na yun. Wala na re-election, right? So that's why everyone goes back to the Arroyo situation, who replaced Erap before his third Sona. Therefore, Arroyo was able to run again in 2004. Although, albeit very, very controversial because she promised not to run and yet she ran. And then the Hello Garcia and the whole thing, and that's why her legacy was essentially destroyed. Pero ibang usapan yan. If you want to get to know more about that, read yung article natin. I'm sorry, check my interview with President Arroyo when I ask her, and it looks like she was surprised. I asked her, why did she run? She said she's not gonna run, and I asked her. Okay. Anyway, kaya nga sabi ko, bad joke talaga yung kay Sara Duterte na designated survivor. That is just ridiculous. Because clearly she's a line of succession, so I don't think she was referring to line of succession issue. She's immediately the next in line, right? So kaya immediately everyone was thinking about Netflix. That's the conspiratorial way of looking at it. Now, if you look at a more critical stance, no? Pag ikaw ay nag-iisip, ikaw ay analytic ang approach mo, and you're looking at the political landscape ahead for Marcos Jr. in his third State of the Nation address, Marcos Jr. said that ang kanyang focus sa kanyang third State of the Nation address will be primarily economics. All right, will be primarily economics. And that makes sense. That makes absolute sense, guys. Because if you look at Marcos Jr., the one area he's doing really bad, all right, in terms of at least approval ratings, I'll give you an objective analysis also where I stand on Marcos Jr.'s economic policy. But one area where he's doing really bad in terms of surveys, and that explains bakit bumaba yung kanyang rating since last year, and why he's having barely the support of more than half of Filipino voters, is because of his handling of the economy. So hindi lang siya inflation, it's also all other major areas of economic management. Poverty alleviation, hunger alleviation, wage rates, not to mention also corruption. So in 5 different indicators or economic related indicators, negative yung net rating ni Marcos Jr. I just want to pull this out, guys, para lang makikita nyo. Ibe-breakdown natin. And then I'll explain to you what would be a critical thinking approach dito sa challenge ni Marcos Jr. ahead of his upcoming Sona. So doon sa mga syunga, mga bayaran, and all of that, si Richard, bakit di ba kinikriticize si PBM? Una-una, kung DDS kayo, mahiya kayo sa balat nyo dahil kayo nagpanalo kay Marcos. So, mahiya kayo sa balat nyo in the sense that if you're gonna attack other people as pro-Marcos and attack Marcos and all of that, remember, kayo ang nagpanalo kay Marcos Jr. He was just number 3. Isko was even ahead of him at some point in 2021. Alright? If you look at quarter 2 surveys. Okay? So, kayong nagpanalo kay BBM. Alright? Although, of course, bago magalit yung mga kababayan natin na Solid North, umakyat naman talaga ang approval ni BBM. At saka kapalpakan ng mga Dutertes na they were not able to consolidate a ticket under Sara Duterte dahil BBM, dahil Digong ang gulugulong kausap, medyo sabog. He was pushing for Bongo, ganun. In the end, wala. Kinain yung lunch nila. Ito. So, this is the Pulse Asia survey, guys. Pakita ko sa inyo. I don't know if this was analyzed enough, but this is very serious, guys. So, if you look at it, guys, all the negative, alright, saan ba? All the negative red na you'll see here, right? All the net negative are on the economic issues, alright? So, where does Marcos do best? Interestingly, Marcos has maintained his appeal among the OFWs. So he has a net positive 64 approval rating pagdating sa protection of welfare of Filipino OFWs. 70% approval, only 6% disapproval. Baka ito yung mga hardcore DDS na nasa abroad. 24% undecided. Pagdating sa calamity management, 64% approval, 7% disapproval, 29%. Sa ang daming undecided. But ang laki nung positive, plus 57%. Defending the West Philippine Sea, he's plus 30% with 48% approval and 18% disapproval. That 18%, siguro ito yung mga more digong school of thought, or they want us to be more aggressive and assertive. Alright, undecided is 34%. Alright, so medyo mahalaga na i-up nila yung communications nila because my sense is on West Philippine Sea, he can even get higher approval ratings. But, down. Actually, interestingly, on fighting criminality, despite lahat ng mga sinasabi ng mga DDS na yan, ay, mahina yan si BBM, si BBM. Actually, he has a plus 26 net approval ratings. 47% approve of his anti-crime policies, 21% disapprove. Siguro ito yung more digong version, DDS version. Pero, vast majority are either okay or undecided. So he has a net positive 26% fighting corruption. Alright? Now, there's one economic area where he's not doing too bad, which is employment generation. Now, just to be absolutely clear about this, guys, pagdating sa employment generation, our economy is the fastest growing in ASEAN next to Vietnam. So it's just between us and Vietnam, sino fastest growing, 5-6%. Although it's slowing, still it's very fast. So it's natural na magkakaroon ng mas maraming trabaho. And accordingly, actually, his approval is plus 32. 32% approval, 30% disapproval, 38% unsure. So he still has a net positive 2. It's not great, but it's not bad. Now, kung titignan mo yung mga weaknesses ni BBM, practical and all other relevant issues na may kinalaman sa ekonomiya. Increasing the pay of workers sa wages, approval lang niya is 24%. Disapproval niya is 39%. Fighting graft and corruption, 39% disapproval, 24% lang approval. Addressing hunger, 26% lang approval, 35% disapproval, giving him a negative 9. On the issue of corruption and wages, he has a negative 15 net approval rating. On reducing poverty, he only has a 17% approval rating, but 51% disapproval rating. That gives him a negative net 34 approval rating. So essentially, more disapproval than approval by far. And then, ito talagang sobrang mahina niya. Ito yung talagang Achilles heel ni BBM. He only has a 5% approval on inflation. I don't know sino bang masaya sa inflation situation natin. I mean, you can say na siguro, baka more understanding iba na if you look at our inflation, well, it's not as bad as Turkey and Argentina. In fact, it's among the lowest among many peers in emerging market, but still it's high enough to hurt a lot of people, no? Uy, Motoko King, sino ka? Sorry naman sa dalawang followers mo. Ayan, tanggal ka para hindi ka na magulo dito. Nangasar lang mga to eh. Oh, yes. Pag mga asar kayo sa akin, asarin ko kayo, wala kayong laban, okay? And this is my platform, I can kick you out anytime I want. Okay? O may nag-mention at least nag-champion ng Argentina. Oh, that's why I look forward to Spain versus Argentina, no? Labanan ng mga Spanish-speaking people. Although Argentinians are, a lot of them are actually Italians. Whether it's the Great Pope here or it's Messi, they have, or Angel de Maria. A lot of them have Italian, Southern Italian, Central Italian background. Anyway, going back to this. So he's doing very well. He's doing very bad sa economic issues if you look at BBM in terms of approval rating niya. All right. So we have to make sense out of this, guys. We have to make sense out of this. What's going on here? Kasi that explains why ang hina ni ang baba ng bumababa yung approval rating ni BBM. In fact, let us break down by sector, no? By classes. By classes. I-break down natin. All right. So if you look at the issue of controlling inflation, sobrang mahalaga yan para sa ating mga kaubayan. And 66% of the poorest Filipinos class is said, ito yung dapat pinaka number one issue. Pinaka number two issue is improving national economy, and third, creating more jobs and livelihoods. So, kitang-kita natin guys dito na sobrang mahalaga para sa ating mga kababayan itong economic issues. So, accordingly, President Marcos Jr. made it clear na yun yung magiging focus niya sa parating na third State of the Nation address niya. Alright? And as I said, hindi lang mababa yung kanyang approval rating. In fact, puro net negative on all key economic issues with the slight exception of the job creation front. But actually, he's also having negative changes, right? For instance, on fighting graft and corruption, actually his numbers even went down by another -2. Slightly nag-improve on other issues, but it's really net negative. By far, double-digit net negative on many different issues. Okay. Ito talaga, ito tong troll boy na to. Tanggalin na natin dito, ha? Binigyan ka na kitang chance, ha? O, yan. Alis ka na. Boom. Sorry naman sa'yo. Okay. Yan. I mean, this is why there are people there who are not even intelligent enough to realize that if yung 6 years in Digong, you didn't get to intimidate me with all the death threats and attacks, you think you're gonna intimidate me now? Diba? Na medyo malaki-laki na rin ano natin, diba? Alright, anyway, going back to this. Natatawa lang talaga ako dun sa iba na hindi talaga nag-upgrade. iPhone 1 pa rin mag-isip. Alright. No, we have to do this kasi you know what? You have to have house cleaning. I think obligasyon ng lahat ng vloggers, lahat ng political thinkers, lahat ng mga to guard their spaces. Kasi safe space dapat dito, guys. Dapat safe space dito. Alright? When you come to my platforms, this is where we're gonna have intelligent discussions, friendly discussions, respectful discussions, and kung may agreement naman kayo, okay lang naman sa akin. Pero kung mangbabastos kayo, mga asar kayo, alis kayo dito. Alright? Block kayo kaagad. This is my way of protecting my space, guys. Pinaghirapan natin itong platforms natin. I fought very hard for these platforms. Yung mga years na pinapa-shutdown yung platforms natin, may ilang buwan na wala yung page ko na isa. Ang daming I fought hard for this to make sure this is a safe space. So, just like in my classrooms, when I teach in university, I make sure it's a safe space. You can have contradictory points of view and be respectful. Ganun din sa akin dito sa platforms ko. Okay? So, kung kayo, if you don't know how to behave yourself, you're gonna get blocked. As simple as that. Okay? Act like an adult, behave yourself. Otherwise, I'm gonna deal with you immediately. Okay? I'm not gonna waste time. Anyway, going back to this. So if you look at it, he's not really doing well in terms of public approval on any of the major economic issues. That's quite interesting because if you look at the headline news about the Philippines, it's purong Philippines fastest growing economy in Southeast Asia. Philippines, I'm part of that narrative too. Quiet rise of the Philippines, The Economist magazine, they interviewed also me on that issue. Ako rin, I've been writing about, the Philippines. But I always said the Philippines is quietly rising in spite of our bad politics. And that's precisely where I want to come in because yes, President Marcos Jr. has said, let me read the exact quote of his. All right. President Marcos Jr. has said na talagang tututukan niya itong economic issues dun sa kanyang darating na Sona. All right. Pero para sa akin, okay, given na yan, parati naman niya ginagawa yan. Halos lahat ng mga Sona niya, purong economy. At saka, kasama naman talaga yan sa branding niya, di ba? That whole maharlika, pa-techno-populist effect, yung mga ganun, pa-Macron effect, yung ganyan. Okay, gets ko na yan. That's part of his branding and all of that. And also, that's his way of getting around, divisive issues and projecting unity and all of that. But, simple naman ang argument ko dito eh. And I think The Economist also had a very good the piece on this. Mahirapan talaga si BBM na mag-focus dun sa key issues, structural challenges. Kasi 'di ba, kung gusto mong pagandaan ng Philippine economy, at yun yung criticism ko ng lahat ng past 3 administrations, current and the past 2. All from Aquino to Duterte to Marcos, all of them oversaw historical high growth rates. All of them also oversaw a not so inclusive economic development. Kaya kita mo, pagdating sa informal sector, pagdating sa poverty rates, pagdating sa employment rates, sobrang problematic pa rin ang Pilipinas. Yumaman yung mga mayaman. Daming yayamanin sa Pilipinas. At nakita natin sa latest news, Philippines has the hottest luxury real estate market in the world. Natalo pa natin ang Dubai. Right? So, yung mga tao dyan na may properties, tao dyan na may apartments, yung mga nakatira sa BGC or nakatira sa mga different hubs in Manila, all of them are doing well. They're getting richer and richer. At ang daming mga bagong yayamanin sa Pilipinas. Tignan mo yung mga tignan mo yung mga Lamborghini sa BGC. Tignan mo yung dami ng mga BMWs and Benz sa I don't know, Green Hills area, among others. I can go on and on about this. Not to mention, of course, Makati, yung mga old rich, lalong naging mayaman. Lalo na dahil ang dami mga pogo din na gano'n sa CBD area na. But, do you get what I'm saying? But, at the same time, kung titignan mo yung mga ating mga simpleng mamamayan, especially yung mga masa, hindi ganun ka-significant yung improvement. Yes, dumami yes, consistent yung ayuda, consistent yung, I don't know, for peace, Bulsa Familia version natin sa Pilipinas, conditional cash transfers. But in terms of really making sure that vast majority of our kababayan, meron silang proper housing, proper healthcare, proper, all of the basic things that you expect in the 21st century, sobrang walang masyadong improvement na nangyari. Alright, sobrang hindi ganun kalaking improvement na nangyari. At nakita natin, yung mga oligarchs natin, lalong yung mayaman, right? Yung mga oligarchs natin, umakyat pa by billions of dollars yung kanilang mga assets and net wealth over the past year alone. So yung mga mayaman at saka mga upper class and upper middle class have been doing very well in the Philippines. And that's where the bulk of the growth is really concentrated. Very concentrated in growth in the Philippines, right? It's the worst in Asia, right? Even nung panahon ni Pinoy, when the Philippines was just taking off again, according to the World Bank, 40 richest families took home 76% of newly created growth. All right, that information is out there. I don't know why some Dilawan people and Dilawan economists and all never saw that, but anyway, that's an important factor to keep in mind. And although the Asian Development Bank said that there has been some improvement in terms of poverty elevation due to wage increases, because I'm looking at all of this data. I deal with the World Bank, I deal with the Department of Finance, I give advice here and there. So, I have to know about all of these things. I study these things. I do consultancies here and there. I give advice to big investors on economic issues and political issues. So, I need to know about all of these things. So, if titignan mo over the past decade or so, we are still failing in terms of creating inclusive development. So, Vietnam and the Philippines have more or less the same size of economy. They have slightly higher per capita na, thanks to kapalpakan ni Digong, nag-overtake ng Vietnam sa atin for the first time in half a century, nung 2020-2021, in terms of per capita income. But Vietnam adds 3 times more middle class to its population every year compared to the Philippines. So, similar size, similar growth, but 3 times more middle class. And that tells you how concentrated growth is in the Philippines compared to Vietnam, right? It's a serious problem we have. It's a very, very serious problem we have in the Philippines. So, I think the problem here is not with BBM per se. The problem here is with the economic development model that the Philippines has had over the past decade or so. Essentially, wala tayong industrial strategy and a corresponding trade strategy to make sure na gagawa tayo ng manufacturing. Mga Vietnamese, meron na silang electric cars. Mga Chinese cars, napakaganda. Dito ako sa Espanya ngayon, I was talking to some people about how nice they were saying how nice the Chinese cars are. I was in Amsterdam the other day, walking down in a posh area, andun yung NIO, N-I-O, is that the proper Chinese cars in a hip, posh areas. China is coming up with really nice electric cars. Vietnam has electric cars. Thailand and Indonesia and Malaysia have a number of big service-oriented, chains like Shangri-La Hotels, for instance, right? Singapore already has a number of world-class companies and all. And Pilipinas, hanggang ngayon, tingnan mo yung mga mayayaman sa Pilipinas, the same oligarchic practices, extractive, real estate, services, o yung iba, land grabber pa. Wala manufacturing whatsoever. And it's expensive. So in fairness, for instance, there were efforts by the Ayalas to get into electric, bike production, a little bit into computer and robotics. Even space technology. There was some effort by Gokong Wei, for instance, kudos to them, to go into steel and some of these key industries. Marcos gave a big speech about these issues. Um, but you need an industrial strategy because you have to provide subsidies, you have to provide all sorts of support mechanisms to make it sure na either yung international companies magse-set up dito or magjo-joint venture sila dito or magde-develop tayo ng sarili natin version ng, let's say, electric cars or some world-class manufacturing sector. Yun ang hindi natin nagawa. And if you look at any relevant study on economic development, whether it's Danny Rodrik, Acemoglu, all of these Turkish American great economists, Harvard, MIT, among others, all of them say manufacturing is very, very important, creating inclusive development. That's extremely, extremely important. And you need industrial strategy. You also need a trade strategy because kung bukas yung economy mo na sa mga katsipangan na imports here and there, which is making some of the oligarchs very, very rich, right? Cheap imports from China, sell with 20-30% profit, do that en masse, billionaire ka na, boom. And then you can make sure on the sites you fix everything regulatory, otherwise in tax. Alam niyo na yan. Okay, connect the dots. So, very, very extractive, very feudalistic, very backward yung parang na yumayaman yung mga oligarchs sa atin. So, barely any of our oligarchs are involved in high-tech manufacturing, anything that is world-class, technologically, manufacturing-wise, that can really create good jobs and put the Philippines on an upward trajectory. So that is a big explanation why the Philippines doesn't have a lot of inclusive development. And this is what's nakaka-frustrate dun sa mga supposedly pink economies or whatever. Na I don't hear much from them on industrial strategy and all of that. They just talk about corruption reduction. But China has a high corruption rate. A lot of the countries who are rich today, they used to be very corrupt. Vietnam has a high corruption rate. Nakailang presidents. Corruption is an important thing to fight against. Inflation is an important thing to fight against. But there are things that are even more important, which is inclusive development, real wages, mga ganon. And then for some reason, in your run-of-the-mill, Dilawan economies, whatever, they just don't discuss this thing. So it's just weird. You go to the United States, industrial strategy. Biden, Trump, both of them have their own version. Here in Europe, Germany, industrial strategy. Even UK is trying to discuss industrial strategy. China, absolutely industrial strategy. Even Vietnam is embracing industrial strategy. Even Indonesia has been pushing for more processing of basic minerals, among others, so that they also build up their manufacturing. Mexico is doing very well because they're getting a lot of Chinese companies to set up their manufacturing there and then indirectly export to the United States because of all the export restrictions. So all of these countries are building robust manufacturing sector. Philippines not yet there. So my problem is not with BBM per se. It's the whole economic model over the past decade. So essentially, some are more corrupt, done with more corruption, some are done with less corruption. But fundamentally, the model is not creating inclusive development and not allowing the Philippines to be on an upward trajectory. Yun talagang problema natin pagdating sa ating economic development. And this is something I've been discussing for quite some time. So, I expect Marcos to say the cliche stuff about essentially macroprudential policy. He's just going to say the same stuff. What I want to hear is really a blueprint and a bunch of really smart people overseeing a new era of manufacturing development in the Philippines and pushing and pressuring our oligarchs also to get more into manufacturing and all, and not just stick to this annoying extractive land grabbing kind of wealth creation and all of that, because that's the only way we can create the kind of growth that our people need. Now, aside from that, and I'm not expecting much, to be honest, in terms of Marcos giving something. And sometimes Marcos says a lot of things, but you need follow through. You need follow through. And this is really the crux of my discussion. Kaya sabi ko, eto kasi, sobrang malalim yung ugat ng problema. Okay? Sobrang malalim yung ugat ng problema pagdating sa tweaking and improving our economic development model. And in order to deal with these issues, you need to have a president who is concentrated. You need to have a president who's surrounded by the right people. You need a president who has enough political capital and policy space to push for these reforms. And ang problema kasi dito is distracted si BBM. Okay, you can easily make an argument that maybe BBM just doesn't have it in him. Alright? We can have a long conversation about him. And I'm not gonna vouch in terms of his appreciation of industrial strategy or having the right people there. Although I've had some very interesting discussions with experts all around the world. You can see, for instance, my interviews, among others, with Professor Tan at Canterbury University the other month. You can even see I discussed semiconductors with Sherwin Gatchalian, Senator Gatchalian. You can see also my interviews on semiconductors with a whole host of different experts around the world. And we'll have more of that in the coming weeks and months, God willing. Um, so I'm not gonna vouch for Marcos in terms of having an gold standard for semiconductor or manufacturing sector development. But what I'm sure about, guys, is this. What I'm sure about is hindi siya makakonsentrate talaga sa mga structural problems na yan habang andun yung mga Dutertes na yan. Alright? And when I say habang nandun, I'm not talking about in existential terms. I'm talking about yung constant threat, constant gulo, constant drama, constant kaegbangan ng ginagawa ng mga Duterte na yan. This is bad for the country on two fronts. Yung mga kaekbangan ng mga Duterte na yan, first of all, distracts BBM. Or some would say gives him more excuse not to do the fundamental reforms and changes that we need in our country, especially on the economic front. And then, this is the other problem we have, mga kameta. The other problem we have is that ang pangit din tignan sa ating bansa. It scares away investors. It scares away investors. Because sabi ang gulo ng bansa na to, minumura lang nung dating presidente, yung kasalukuyan ng presidente. Well, yung vice-presidente mo, parang may bad jokes pa siya, if not a threat, dun sa parating na Sona. Yung ganito mo, yung anak ng dating presidente, pinaparesign lang, ganyan lang. Ang gulo. Ang gulo. We look like a banana republic. And then there's a third factor because, I talk to a lot of investors and people who want to get invested in the Philippines. But the problem is like, they don't know. What if Duterte's come back? Right? Sara is just a heartbeat away. So, parang ang hirap mag-invest sa Philippines kung hindi mo alam ano ba talagang direction ng bansa na ito. Kasi, alam naman natin, pag mga Dutertes ang bumalik, alright? Pag bumalik mga Dutertes, balik na naman tayo dun sa pro-China leaning foreign policy. Maybe Sara or basta whoever. I don't think it's likely. But those kinds of people, if they come back, most likely, they're gonna, excuse me? Yes? Yes. Yeah, I'm just gonna wrap up in soon. Yeah, is it important? Alina? Okay, once again, guys, I'll try to file it. I'll just Okay, give me 5 minutes. I'll come. No, I'm going back to this. Ang gulo kasi ng mga Dutertes, right? And but my point is, at alam din natin, if there is more than 50% chance na makabalik ang mga Dutertes, this could also have tremendous amount of reformulation in the Philippine, just not foreign policy, pero economic strategy. Because the Duterte approach is simple. The Duterte approach is, umasa na lang tayo sa China. Tutulungan tayo in China sa infrastructure development, I don't know, manufacturing, investment, blah, blah, blah. Although we saw in 6 years of Duterte, barely any big-ticket investments. But that would be still the line of Duterte if they come back to power. And then the Marcos approach essentially is, doon na tayo sa kabila. Let's reduce our dependence on China. Let's cushion our economy. Let's focus on national economic security. Let's de-risk. That's the technical term. Essentially not be over-dependent on China. Make sure they're not involved in our critical infrastructure. So umasa naman tayo sa kabila. But ang weird because at the end of the day, this has to be about the Philippine national interest. It's not about whether we're in Team China or Team US. Mali yung ganyan na approach We have to be Team Philippines, and Team Philippines means we have an economic strategy that allows us to maximize investments from all sides, from China, from Europe, from Japan, from US, etc. And all of these things are, I think, really holding the country back. So I think as long as magulo itong usapan sa pagitan ng mga Dutertes and Marcoses, habang tuloy-tuloy itong mga attack ng mga Dutertes, mga biro nila or not so biro nila, all of these things are really holding the country back and also not allowing the current president, whether he has it in him or not, to really fully concentrate and deal with fundamental issues, including power, including infrastructure, including a lot of things. Yes, things are moving here and there, but you need some fundamental blueprint to push the Philippines in the right direction. Okay, I have to go. May tumatawag sa akin. Let me just end on this note. Thank you very much again, guys, for listening to us. All I'm saying here is Marcos has to be decisive, and this whole interdynastic fight is not good for the country. I hope something will be done about this in accordance to our our laws and democracy and all of that. Obviously, hindi naman kulang sa mga dating okay. All right. Connect the dots. You can check our other interviews and all of that. So later this week, hopefully we'll have, God willing, we'll have both Justice Carpio again and also with Ronald Llamas. So let's do an R&R again, and then siguro after Sona and Tres Marias na naman na RRM. Okay? On that note, thank you very much mga kameta. I hope you had a wonderful day, a wonderful week. Please continue to support us. Appreciate you if you continue to subscribe to our channel on YouTube, on of course to follow us. My subscription din dyan sa Facebook, because that will allow you to also have constant update, etc. If I'm live, kasi I don't know, may pinalitan sila sa algorithm nila where they don't give an automatic update if my live and all, on like 2-3 years ago. Kaya dati mas maraming live na nanonood. But anyway, and of course, please, and if you think we deserve it, a 5-star, if you were a good star, whatever rating, libre lang yan on Spotify and podcast, libre lang po yan. O yan man nagbabay, di buy kayo, di buy lang. Daming epal talaga. Yeah, if you think, because we really appreciate that. Any support, any sharing, etc., puts us on the good side of the algorithm and allows more and more people to hear about this, because the message you're hearing here, you're not gonna hear in other bloggers and all of that. You're not gonna, the other ones is all the usual stuff about, just talking about corruption, inflation, just talking about drama. I talk about industrial strategy. I talk about trade policy. I talk about manufacturing. I talk about semiconductors. I'm talking about all of these different issues, right? Put them together. Big picture, blueprint moving forward. Yun pong kailangan natin para umakyat yung antas ng ating pag-iisip at antas ng ating pag-iintindi doon sa mga suliranin sa ating mga problema sa ating bayan at saka yung mga challenges and opportunities ahead. On that note, thank you very much. God bless and talk to you soon. Salamat po. God bless po. Thank you.